Hello dear listener, join me as I traverse 100 years of horror cinema, one flick at a time. Boris Karloff, this time not as the monster but as a Frankenstein-like mad scientist, returns to this star-studded mashup, The House of Frankenstein 1944. Karloff escapes prison in the opening scene with a most fortuitous lightning strike that sees him and a now cliched hunchback offsider leave behind their chalk-covered walls with such striking revelations such as H2O equals H2O. Perhaps set dressing in such pictures was such that they were not planning on 4K televisions decades later to allow for greater scrutiny. The film, written by Hollywood legend Kurt Sidermack, not to be confused with his brother Robert, who also worked at Universal, is functionally a collection of two or more stories that somewhat fit together. The first reel, once the aforementioned prologue is done, focuses on the resurrection and demise of Dracula, this time not played by Bela Lugosi as he was deemed too old, even though he had played a Dracula-like character only a year prior in The Return of the Vampire and would return to the role in the near future. This time the vampire is played by the esteemed John Carradine, who brings a theatrical Shakespearean sensibility to the role. While he is not as hypnotic, audiences who lament the lack of Lugosi will love the lavish role by this new Lothario. The film hints at what might have been, had Carradine done a full Dracula picture himself, but alas, it's over just as it begins. The film never delivers on its promise of Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, all meeting at the same time. Dracula is disposed of in what is functionally a short story before the main film takes over at the half-hour mark and Lon Chaney's Wolfman, aka Lawrence Talbot, returns. The connective tissue? Karloff's desire to learn the powers and knowledge of the late Dr. Frankenstein. This means, to the film's detriment, that the Dracula subplot is merely a diversion. Some key players, most notably Universal regulars Lionel Atwill and George Zucco, also depart too soon. Karloff, on the other hand, is, while not at his best, a delight to watch. The mad scientist was not his most iconic role, but is one that fits him to perfection. He delivers his lines with a scrumptious delight and ill intent. With the resolution of the young couple's love and Dracula vignette, the cliché love story falls upon Karloff's hunchback, played by J. Carrol Naish, and so-called gypsy girl Ionka, played by Alana Verdugo. The rest of the plot rests on the flimsy notion that Karloff's doctor can give his servant Daniel a new body and Chaney some release from the werewolf curse by building him a new brain. This was an example of the changes in the mad scientist pictures that started with the original Frankenstein 1931. By the 1940s and into the atomic age, soon audiences would be bombarded by mad scientists doing wrong and being punished for it. This is an example of a transition from the more contemplative classics of the 30s into the derivative versions of the 50s. Direction by Erle Kenton is functional and at times striking. Use of lighting, POV shots and shadows keep things interesting. Karloff's performance is solid, although the character is one-dimensional. It has been suggested that seeing the degradation of his beloved monster, he was not too keen to take part in the film. Nevertheless, seeing him once again in a Universal picture is a delight. Speaking of, The House of Frankenstein is apt as a title as the picture's disparate parts are connected by the science of the late Doctor. However, those expecting a showing by the man's monster will be left wanting. The cliché in later films was for the creature to be comatose and appear to wreck everything in the closing minutes. Actor Glenn Strange was given nothing to work with, and his poor makeup effects didn't help, although his stature adds to the physical presence well enough. One does not need a degree in brain surgery to know the logic of the film is deeply flawed. However, the joy of seeing these monsters on screen together and the performances make the film an enjoyable romp. The film was a modest hit and spawned one final sequel the following year, which too was a modest success, although derivative of this picture, House of Dracula, more authentically incorporated the three creatures into a fast-paced and dramatic showdown, and finally gives Chaney's Talbot a satisfying conclusion. But this marks the near end of the second horror cycle. Universal had made its business model more in line with television production, which would begin to dominate in the following decade. This factory approach was evident in the decline in quality of the horror staples. Historically, it's also the first example of a mashup that would become the normal during the modern corporate age of filmmaking. However, this is no Avengers or even Avengers Age of Ultron. It's merely an excuse to bash these monsters together. While not a high point of the Universal films, it is a fun, brainless adventure for fans of the genre. Enjoy!